And September is over. We are in the month of October, which brings us to another letter of Paul. 3 left.
Yep, winding down
for 2023, and the cool thing is they're kind of a package.
Yeah, we call them the pastoral epistles a lot of times because they all deal with Paul's letters to younger preachers, about their work, or in some cases just about themselves. I think 2 Timothy is more personal than dealing with church work as such. But nonetheless, Paul is certainly mentoring these younger men.
Yeah, another difference with the group, and we should mention the group. 1 Timothy in October.
Yes.
Titus in November.
And then 2 Timothy in December.
And then 2 Timothy in December. So yeah, they're all kind of tied together because they're written to individuals.
Which we started in September with Philemon, actually. Like Philemon. Yeah, we're done with church letters now.
And they do have a lot to say about guys that are preaching and some of the stuff they were going through, some of the stuff they were dealing with.
Right.
Before we get into content, let's talk a little bit about setting. You chose to place these 3 toward the end.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about timing. Although in some cases, like with 2 Timothy, that this is near the end is crystal clear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in 2 Timothy, Paul makes explicit he expects to die soon.
Yeah. So what about 1 Timothy? Why here?
So 1 Timothy's a little bit more of a challenge. It's, again, if, for those who like to, go to websites or read commentaries, there's a little bit of debate. I think in our context, what we're doing is just trying to read through it as a church. I think there's no reason why, for our purposes, we shouldn't take the standard, most common understanding, which is...
Come on, we can spend an hour talking about the day.
Oh, no. But the folks at home can't spend an hour for us. Yeah, for us doing all that. But the simple idea is that the book of Acts ends with Paul's Roman imprisonment, right? Acts chapter 28, and that's about 62 AD, give or take. You can quibble a little bit, but about 62 or so. And that the most likely setting for 1 Timothy, is Paul was released from that imprisonment. So we're a little bit off the grid in terms of what we know from Acts now. And so honestly, we don't know a whole lot of historical detail. Some have suggested on the basis of various evidence that Paul, remember earlier in his letters to Romans, we read Romans, Paul mentioned he was trying to get eventually all the way over to Spain. In the book of Acts, he never made it that far. The debacle in Jerusalem, and then the imprisonment in Caesarea, imprisonment in Rome, stopped him from that. Some suggested that Paul tried to get to Rome or get to Spain after the Roman imprisonment. After all, he was when he wrote Romans, the whole point was, I'm trying to get to Rome to have you help me get to Spain. Maybe that's what he did. We're not 100% sure, but nonetheless, this probably has something to do with after Paul's Roman imprisonment. So we can't do a whole lot more than that. Chapter 1 and verse 3, as I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus, so that you may charge certain persons not to teach a different doctrine. Some commentators will link that with Acts chapter 20, when Paul leaves Ephesus and he leaves for Macedonia. Timothy may have been left behind there, some sort of background like that. And so Paul wants Timothy to continue on in Ephesus and keep on doing what he's doing there.
So what date are you thinking about? Give us a range.
Somewhere after 62, but
63, 65, maybe.
Yeah, and before he dies,
So where do you date his death?
His death, Nero, he's most likely put to death under Nero. Nero is gone in 68.
So no later than 68.
So yeah, and obviously he's not, he's thinking, he's not expecting to die in this. So yeah, 63, 64, maybe 65. Most, again, it's it's limited speculation that we know some hard end dates past which is not possible. But a lot of people would want to see him die that came out wrong, but would think that he dies somewhere.
There were people who wanted to see him die.
Yes, but
not good guys.
60, but before Nero's death, so maybe 65, 66.
The reason I'm pressing on that is we're dealing with letters now with 1 Timothy and Titus and 2 Timothy that are clearly toward the end of his life.
Yes.
And so a couple of things I think are significant about that. One thing is, this is a guy with an extraordinary amount of experience now.
Oh, yes, right? Yes.
He's been a disciple for a while.
Decades.
And he's been laboring in the gospel for a while. And so lots and lots of experience behind what's said here. And then the second thing is that when you begin to get a sense that the end is coming, I think it also colors your perception of the world and what's happening around you. And maybe not so much with 1 Timothy, but certainly by the time you get to 2 Timothy, I think you really hear the voice of a guy who feels death getting near.
Well, yeah, I mean, you stop and think about it too. As you get older, you're very much concerned with the younger generation who will have to carry on when you're gone, as opposed to establishing new churches, writing to those churches. Paul is very much concerned with the men and their ability to carry on the work that he has done over the decades, because he's, regardless, age or execution, he's simply not going to be around much longer.
Are you old enough to start thinking about that yet?
Hopefully not. You tell me, though.
Well, I have a decade on you.
I know. That's what I'm asking. And you got a big birthday, Lubin, here in another year or so.
Yeah, I know. And so as you could sort of deny being old, but only to
the young people let you know.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to feel that a little more.
But when the first number is a 6,
it's a whole different issue. Yeah.
You just have you have to acknowledge the fact that you're not going to live to be 120, which means you have more yesterdays than tomorrows. And as a preacher, you do think about that more.
Yeah. No, I think so.
Not in terms of leaving legacy, because no matter what legacies we create, they'll all be forgotten. But
the work matters.
But in terms of who will carry on, and who will continue on. So I do think that having that sense, think about that as you read this, that this is a guy who's lived a lot and done a lot, and now he's getting on the back end of life. And I think that to some degree that's reflected. You read a minute ago from 1 Timothy 1 and verse 3, I urge you upon my departure from Macedonia to remain on at Ephesus, so that you may instruct certain men not to teach strange doctrine. So we might begin to think, because of that it's a letter heavily influenced by heresy or issues with false teaching and things like that. And while that is addressed, I don't think it's that narrow. I think that's one piece of really several topics that are covered in the letter. It's really kind of a multi-topic letter where he's, for lack of a better way of saying it, addressing church life.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, you and I have both talked about, and I think, next week, especially when we do more content of the book, flesh out the idea, chapter 3, verses, what is it? Is it verses 14, 15?
Well, let me read that. I'm writing these things to you, hoping to come to you before long, but in case I'm delayed, I write so that you will know how one ought to conduct himself in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and support of the truth. And so, that passage to me kind of hangs like an umbrella over the whole letter. That if you want to kind of know what's going on, it's about stuff that happens in the church family.
Right. And that begins to make sense of, everything from, why he says what he says about women being silent in the assembly in chapter 2 and not teaching or having authority over man, to chapter 3, elders and deacons and their qualifications. Chapter 5, the widows. So anyways, we're getting ahead to the next week. But yeah, I mean, basically church life. But it's interesting, as you just noticed, in that, the first thing he actually says is about false teaching, though, false doctrine. Because you look at that, and even the word sound teaching, or sound, which also will occur in these letters that we're going to be looking at these next 3 months. The word sound literally is just the idea of health or healthy. And so the idea is that bad teaching is almost like a virus or a disease that goes through the body of Christ, the local church, and its local manifestation, and makes it sick and can even kill it. This false teaching, bad ideas. And so it's interesting that it's still very much a part of what Paul sees as being the necessary, as much as the right structure, the right pattern, the right organization matters. What's said in the church matters too.
Right. And so the interesting thing is you have this letter that's going to deal with sort of stuff that goes on in the church.
Yeah.
And the remarkable thing about that is how much it doesn't change, right?
Yeah, same old, same old.
Same old, yeah. And then he deals with it from the perspective of Timothy's work as a preacher.
Yeah.
For this group of disciples. So I think that's an important thing to remember too. That's our perspective. It's not the perspective of a shepherd of this church or from one of the members sitting in the pew, but from the perspective of the preacher. What is he supposed to be doing to help this church family with the things that they're wrestling with?
Yeah.
So as you read the letter, be pondering that. Think about the circumstances. And I meant to add this. Let's just wrap up with this. We ought to say something about the fact that it's Ephesus.
Yeah.
Because this is an important church to Paul.
Yeah, so, from the book of Acts, according, at least as far as we know from Acts, he spent more time in Ephesus than anywhere else. Strategically, it was a major city in the Roman Empire, the major city kind of in Asia Minor. And so, what starts in Ephesus spreads throughout the region. It had already been warned, Acts chapter 20, Paul warned those elders, ironically, that from even among themselves would false teachers come. And then you've got just a simple other thing, too, within the context of the whole New Testament. This goes a little bit beyond Paul, but, from Paul's work there to the glorified Lord Jesus in Revelation, the first of the letters in the seven churches of Asia is to Ephesus, criticizing their loss of their first love. So, throughout the whole New Testament as a whole, Ephesus really is a significant church.
Yeah, and so the interesting about that is he is writing to the preacher who carried on the work after him.
Yeah.
So I have actually had the opportunity to communicate with guys who were working with churches that I had worked with at one time.
Yeah.
And so that's a very interesting dynamic to think about as you're reading the letter too. This is this church family very dear to Paul. He spent a lot of, he had to have some tight friendships with people there, or people he'd converted.
Right.
And now he's writing to the guy who's carrying on the work behind him. And so I think as you read that, all of those factors need to influence how we're processing this letter. Older guy getting on the back end of life, young protege doing a work where Paul had once worked with people that are special to him, and a church facing some challenges. And so we get to sort of look over Paul's shoulder and read his letter.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find there's some really helpful, useful, relevant things for disciples today.
Oh, it's a great letter.
As we said a minute ago, things don't change very much.
No.
And so I think we'll find ourselves as we read this letter. So for week number 1, just spend some time going through it. If you could kind of go through it once a day, it's not a very long letter. And when we come back together next week, we'll think a little bit about what is the big idea. Maybe you can be thinking about that as you read this week.